Ian has done a very, very good channel on Buffy. He doesn't just do Buffy, he actually intended to do a lot more, but it's become a de facto Buffy channel. And in this essay, he goes into the Woods and is very critical of it. I'm a much bigger fan of the I'm a much bigger fan of the episode than he is, obviously, but I just found some problems with the way he's framing Riley and his relationship to Buffy. And we're going to go through this a little thoroughly because it's a much, much longer video essay. Usually, when he does his episode guides, they're fairly short and they try to get to the point. Riley is sort of notorious for being very unpopular with fandom. I'm sort of a middling opinion with him. I think it's just unfortunate he didn't get really too many good scripts. I think he's being misjudged sometimes, but I don't like what the character ultimately symbolizes. I'm actually more on his side than you might think, but I do think he makes at certain points some really unfair charges in terms of how the character was developed.
One of Riley's best in the series, as the two of them commiserate over their feelings for a girl they both believe they can't be with. I think what we bond with is two macho dudes being vulnerable, even if that vulnerability is deeply tainted with some bad ideas. Then Riley finds Buffy, and then... You know what? Let's dig into all this in a minute. Buffy-Riley ultimatum, words, Xander and Buffy runs to the helicopter in a scene we're supposed to feel like is really, really ridiculously romantic before Riley flies away.
I just want to tell you that. No.
How can I tell it's intended to be really ridiculously romantic? The music. The music is so emotionally specific that it's not possible to headcanon anything other than the episode tacitly endorsing everything Xander said and, by association, the other dude behavior in the episode. This specific bit is a variation on the race for your love or airport run trope.
Well, if Hollywood movies have taught us anything, it's that troubled relationships can be completely patched up by a mad dash to the airport.
Perhaps a subversion, given it's most common to romantic comedies and typically ends with a couple getting back together. But the very use of a trope common to romantic comedies, along with the music, tells us the episode itself, distinct from any of the characters' opinions in it, has taken a perspective that this is all deeply romantic.
So Ian's basic perspective here is that in terms of Into the Woods, where Riley and Buffy break up, Riley is too fast to blame Buffy for the whole situation, and he's not taking enough responsibility. I do think actually he does blame himself quite a lot, not just in this episode, but throughout their whole relationship. He is willing to say that, yes, I do have problems. In fact, Buffy in that conversation brings up that he can't handle the fact that she has these superpowers and these super abilities, including being much stronger than he is. He admits that is an issue. So I'm not seeing that Riley is a symbol of toxic masculinity. He's definitely got a lot of problems and a lot of flaws, but I also don't agree that Xander is being out of place to stick up for him because, again, what Riley is basically is a very reliable, dependable person, and he tries to be helpful to Buffy. Whether he succeeds is another question, but I think he's more often than not very sincere and in awe of her, which again makes sense in terms of the framing of the show. Now, I myself am not the biggest Buffy fan in terms of the character, but I think the show is pretty good. Again, when it is good, but sometimes it's very bad. And usually the Noxon episodes I don't think are very well done. But I have to say, I think Noxon did a pretty good job directing and writing this episode. Ian does admit there are things that Buffy does that seem a little bit out of place in terms of her seeking vengeance and needlessly killing vampires just to avenge what they did with Riley. See, I disagree with him on this. I think, again, the whole point of the episode is to show a lot of flaws on all sides, with Spike, Riley, and Buffy really wanting things in another person that are not really there. So Riley wants Buffy to totally devote herself to him. He's not really understanding that she has all these duties to different people and she can't spend all this time with him and she can't be as dedicated to him as he would like, even if that's a very normal human impulse. And of course, Spike, even though he's framing it that he's, quote, helping Riley, clearly is jealous of him and Buffy and wants her for himself. But it's also the case, I think, that Buffy does want the same thing from her partner. She wants total dedication, she wants total loyalty, she wants XYZ over and over again, and isn't as responsive to what their needs are. Again, she just hopes that they will fulfill her needs. She's not really concerned with what they're feeling at the time. It's really what they're going to primarily do for her. This is all post-Angel. Whether the character would have developed differently without that relationship, we can only speculate. We only have the text we have in front of us. And I think Ian does a good job of showing a lot of clips where Riley is at his worst, but we want to be fair and show him where he's at his best, where at the end of the day, I think he's overall more admiring and in awe of Buffy. Did he ever develop his own strong personality? I agree. It was too much about he's in love with Buffy. And when the initiative story ended, there was not much more for him to do. And I didn't even like what they did with him in the initiative, him being, quote, an anarchist. I don't think Noxon understands what anarchism is or what an anarchist is. So her understanding of politics pretty basic and puerile. It's not very sophisticated. And that, I think, did a lot of damage to the character, where he's, quote, rebelling against the system, but you're like, but why is he rebelling? Apparently he's for disorder, and the military represents too much order. But in this season, the military actually comes off kind of good. She's not very consistent or coherent with what her criticism of masculinity and or militarism. It's just very confusing. So she's no Noam Chomsky, I'll say that much. But I think, again, for the purposes of this episode, she doesn't have to be. She's just trying to get at why Buffy has such problems with a long-term relationship. And it's, again, I think she is very demanding. The people she is with are very demanding themselves, and there's just always a difficulty in the two aligning together, which is why I think Buffy and Spike work best, because it's not that they're meant for one another or that romantically they're the best suited for one another. It's more that it's kind of like the least worst solution to a vexing problem that Buffy has, both as a mythos but also as a woman. So I think I'd go with Spike, but more because there just aren't that many other good choices available, unless you count Scott, but he never stuck around long enough, so it's hard to analyze him. I agree that Riley's not a good boyfriend and has a lot of issues, but I don't buy that it's all Riley's fault. There's clearly a lot of miscommunication going on both sides. But it's a very intriguing essay, and we're going to get more into the specifics about what Ian brings up, which are some strong points, but I think he just goes a little overboard. All right, this is part one of the Riley-Buffy controversy. Thanks for listening.